Hi, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you are. This is Evan McLaughlin. I'm a content marketing specialist with Minitab. I want to thank you for joining our What's New in Minitab 19 webinar. Now, I'll hand it over to our expert presenter, Jenn Atlas, in a few moments, but first, just a few housekeeping notes. The webinar audio is available through your computer. There's no dial-in number. For the best audio quality, please make sure your speakers or headsets are turned on and the volume is up. Some networks cause slides to advance more slowly than others, so you might see a slight delay. And you might need to log off your VPN to help if you see that issue, or try closing GoToWebinar and logging back in. There's also a questions pane there, so me and some of my colleagues can answer your questions throughout the webinar. Don't worry, this webinar is being recorded. We'll send you the presentation slides and the recording by email later on. So if you need to drop off or want to review anything later, or hopefully you didn't have any technical issues, but just in case you did, look out for that email with the recording. Your mics are muted, so please feel free to enter any questions in that questions pane that I mentioned. It should be on the right side of your screen in the GoToWebinar controls. We do capture all questions, and again, myself and my colleagues will answer them as they come, whether it's about the Minitab software or any questions you have about the webinar itself. But we'll also have time for Q&A with Jenn at the end, so we might hold some of those questions. We'll let you know if you have a question that seems like it would be best for the benefit of everybody else to hear. And finally, to make this a bit more interactive, we'll be putting a couple of polls across the screen. So please go ahead and answer those in the polling pane in GoToWebinar when you see them come across. They'll help us guide the conversation for you. And when this webinar closes out, we will have a survey as well if you'd be able to answer a few questions there. We appreciate you taking the time out of your day to answer those. And now, introducing our presenter for today, Jenn Atlas. Jenn is an expert statistician with over 20 years experience in the quality improvement and consumer goods industries. And we have a lot to cover. I want to make sure we get to as many questions you have as we can. So without further ado, Jenn, let's see what's new with Minitab 19.
Awesome. Thanks, Evan. And like Evan said, let's get right to it. First thing I want to do is start off with a quick question, just to see, first of all, thanks everyone for taking time out of your day to participate in this webinar. First thing I'd like to know is, what version of Minitab are you currently using, if you're using one? Give it a couple more seconds. Excellent. All right, great. So it looks like I said, most of you on Minitab 18, some new users coming in that don't use Minitab, so welcome. Focus of this webinar is going to be really what's new, but we have a lot of resources in terms of if you just want to learn about the Minitab system and really how to get in and easily analyze data, we can certainly help you with that. Okay. One more question. In what area are you using Minitab? Okay, this is good. This shows us a breakdown of the audience, and this is very interesting. So kind of, what I might expect, some reliability, engineering, product development. Hopefully we had your choice up here. Apologize if we didn't, but actually nice background, business analytics, process validation, quality. We go into that. So within Minitab, and like I said, if you're familiar with our organization or if you're not, one thing at Minitab that we really believe in is that it doesn't matter what your statistical background is, engineering, business, analytics, whatever you're doing, that everybody's empowered when they have easy to use analysis tools, and that everyone in their job nowadays has data in some aspect affecting their work. So really, we kind of really strive to make analysis and getting data and analyzing data and presenting data as easy as it possibly be. So Minitab 19 really delivers on this commitment to make data analysis really faster for existing users, new users, navigation improvements that I'm going to show you, easier to come into the system. If you're one of the new users who have never used Minitab before, I think you'll find that this version makes it much easier to come into the system, try to just orient yourself and be able to get results pretty quickly. Better, a lot of improvements in terms of, besides just navigation, a lot of things under the covers in terms of a 64-bit version and some other improvements that I'm going to outline today. So if we look at the features just at a glance, when we talk about release 19, I think the thing we'll most remember it for will be that better interface. We spent a lot of time with focus groups, customer data, voice of the customer, and one of the things we saw is that we always talked about that we thought Minitab was pretty easy to use, and we realized, you know what, it could be easier. When we watch people analyze data and struggling with minimizing windows to find things, we saw that, you know what, the need for an anchored navigator will really reduce a lot of the time it takes for someone to identify the results, how they interact with the worksheets. You know, a lot of our users are Excel users. They're never going to stop using Excel, but they're going to expand, some of the analytics that they're doing to use Minitab. Let's make it look even more like Excel than it already did. So I'll go through a lot of these changes, the interface, also some visualization enhancements that we've added, some statistical additions as well as some of those performance improvements I talked about. And like Evan mentioned, we'll have plenty of time for questions towards the end. So like I said, the main improvement on 19 that you notice immediately is a simplified workspace. So, the goal was really, we want to improve the software's usability, make it look like Minitab, still feel like Minitab, but a simpler, cleaner interface on Minitab. We want to make it so easy that when an existing user transitions to this version, or when a new user comes into the system who's never used an analytics package before, we want to make that very obvious in terms of how do you create results, where do you find the tools that you need, and what is that guidance? Like I said, Minitab, we cover a wide range of users. We cover new users who are new to analytics with our assistant menu to get them into the system in terms of help you pick which kind of analysis tool is important. But we also have very complicated, advanced tools for reliability engineers, from power users who are doing some modeling where they need these more advanced tools to get their work done. Either way, it doesn't matter. We want to make it easy to create that analysis, to look at that analysis, and to share that analysis out with other people. So it starts with the worksheets. My plan is that I'm going to go through the list of all the features, and then we'll go into a demo where I'll show you what the software looks like. So one piece of feedback, like I said, a lot of our users use Excel as well. Having tab worksheets is a very familiar way to look at your data. The way you add a new worksheet is pretty obvious now, and also just managing and navigating through those worksheets. So very familiar controls to navigate and look at those, look at your data. Along that same line, in terms of how you access things, there's right mouse click functionality within the worksheet to access things like conditional formatting and all the functionality that we're used to, but also right mouse clicking on a tab of a worksheet will give you things like renaming the worksheet, deleting the worksheet, in this case, the worksheet information. So obviously, once you get data in, you need to do something with it. The output pane is new to 19 in terms of when you generate some results and look at your results. We got rid of the idea of the session window. And what the session window was, for those of you who used 18 or previous releases, was anytime we generated output. And what we said was table output. So the results of a t-test, the regression model that you fit, some summary statistics, that all was placed in the session window. And that session window was that long scroll where every time you added another analysis, it just kept getting added to that session window. And the way you found the different components of analysis that you were interested in was using the show session folder window. Well, that's how we thought people would use it, but in reality, people just kind of scrolled through and tried to find things. Not the most efficient, so we improved this and we came up with the idea of this output pane. So each piece of output that you generate is placed in an output pane. The other improvement to this is in release 18 and previous, any graphs that you generated with that table output always popped up as a separate window. And it was always put on the user to manage the window, windows in terms of your graph output versus your text output. So if you were looking at residual plots, or in this case, factorial plots or fitted line plots, you kind of had to marry up the view with your text data, your text information tables, and also the graphs. The output pane removes that need. So you're going to get your graphs and statistical results together. Very easy to take a look at results, and each command that you issue, each result is contained in its own window. I'll show you how to navigate that and some other cool things around this. The other important thing about the output pane is with the graphs in Minitab 18 and previous, you always knew when the graphs were out of date. So what I mean by that is if the data changed underneath the graph, we gave you some indication that the graph was no longer current, either had a red X or sometimes a white X or different things. But knowing when the graphs are out of date is important, but it's just as important to know when your results are out of date in terms of your regression model or your t-test. So now in the output pane, you'll always know when your results are current. So if the data changes, you'll see what we see over here on the right, where the results aren't current, we need to update those results. I'll talk about updatable results here in just a second, but pretty much you'll have the opportunity, you'll always know when results are out of date. Some cases you'll be able to automatically just update these results in place. In other places you'll have to just rerun the command. We also have that context menu, and this was also in release 18, but that context menu, what that is when I hover over a piece of output, be it a graph or a table result, you get that arrow that pops up on the right, and that context menu, pretty much the same thing as a right mouse click on the Windows version, but that's where I can do things like send my output. So an important component of data analysis is sharing your results with other people. So very easy to send to Word and PowerPoint, and now in 19 we can also send to Companion. Other functionality like graph editing and brushing points is also accessible via that window. So one improvement that I think is really nice is having more updatable commands. So in release 18, you were always able to update your control charts or simple graphs. And the rule of thumb we would tell users is that, well, if it was a graph that had a lot of statistical output on it, you couldn't update that. That's no longer true. So what we've done is we've started with these 4 up here, but the goal is eventually we'll be able to update everything. Things like your graphical summary. We want to start with those tools that we think you're using the most, that are probably most important to you to have the ability to update. So now when you generate probability plots or process capabilities 6-packs, Pareto charts, when your data changes, you will have the option to update those results right in place without requiring you to recreate the results. There's also the ability to set results to be automatically updated, and I'll show you that in the demo. And most important is the navigation. So like I said, I think this is one of those obvious things where I don't need to convince you why having a navigator is good. The dedicated navigator pops up on the left side of the application. You can toggle that on or off to maximize your screen space, but it makes it very easy to see all the different output that you've generated and just with a single click access any of that output. That navigator also has some nice features where I can group those commands by worksheet. So instead of just seeing the laundry list of all the things that you've done in time order, I can also look at those things by the different data sets that I've used to generate the results. Makes it a little bit easier to manage. The other thing I like about this, and I'll show you in the demo, is you can easily turn, well, besides the view on and off, and you can open and close the view by worksheet. So you can see the measurements view here is closed, where there's some analysis underneath it, but I'm not seeing it, where the Beltware one is open. I just think that's convenient when you have a lot of analysis. Some of our users might have 60, pieces of results that they've generated. You don't necessarily want to see all of them in that, so you can close them up by worksheet just to keep the view more manageable. The other nice improvement that we've had is the addition of the split view. So if you think about the session window or just when you're looking to compare results, it was usually easy to compare graphs and to drag two graphs and put them in a side-by-side view, and that's great. But there are times where you want to compare models. Maybe I fit a model and I want to compare with a different factor in it, and I want to see what the R-squared value is. Or I've done a t-test and I've taken out an outlier, and I want to see if the results changed after I've taken out that outlier. I can easily do those analyses and then put my data, my view, split the view, and look at a side-by-side view. And it's not just limited to 2 splits. You can split as many times as you want. Depends on how big your monitor is in terms of how many splits will make sense for you. I'll demonstrate this. Super easy to do, and go in and out of the split view. Look, you can drop and drag to see what's going to be on the left or the right. But this makes it much easier for the analyst, for the researcher, to come through and just take a look at their results. Okay. So I'll get into like I said, the navigation and display when we get into the demo. But let's talk about some of the statistical enhancements. So these are all some of the things that we've added in. And we'll take a look at these with correlation, some regression, model selection improvements. But a lot of things really just there to enhance tools that you told us that you use all the time, and also the addition of some new tools to really help you do your job better. So one thing we always tell people when they analyze, when they look at a correlation coefficient, and correlation coefficient, remember, is just the linear association between 2 variables. We always would teach and tell people that if you're going to look at a correlation coefficient, make sure you look at a graph also to see what the relationship might be. Well, then we make you go and do a graph separately. So now when you ask for correlation, we're going to give you the graph with it. So it includes the matrix plot of the effects. And with that matrix plot, you'll also get things. You can see the correlation value, but also the confidence interval on that correlation. And there's a few different options you have within that tool. So it just makes correlation a little bit easier, looks good, but also get that graph with it, save you some time, so a little faster. Regression now includes a Pareto to show significant effects. I think one of the things that people struggle with when they're doing any kind of modeling is, well, how do you communicate to someone the results of which effects are really significant in that regression model that you fit? Nobody really wants to look at p-values unless you're an analyst or a researcher. They'd rather look at a picture. So we added the Pareto, which is similar to the Paretos that we use within DOE. I think just to give you a picture of what's the biggest effects and to show them. So if you visually wanted to just share with someone and say, hey, what's the biggest impact on this response, you can just use the Pareto chart. For those of you who do a lot of modeling with a lot of different X's, different inputs, you can see that we've added the ability when you use stepwise. So stepwise is when you're fitting any kind of model, the stepwise button is the one that's over towards the right of the dialog. Stepwise is the idea behind that is that if you've got a lot of factors in your model and you're trying to figure out what is the best model to use in terms of which main effects, interactions, whatever you're putting in, stepwise is a way to select that. And we've always had that, but what we've done is we've added our forward information criteria. So now you have a chi-keys criteria and a BIC as well. So that's the first option that you'll have in your dropdown to choose to help pick your model. So if you use stepwise methods to pick models, I definitely recommend that you start using the chi-keys criterion. It's a more modern approach to picking X's. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, that's fine. We can certainly help explain that in more detail at a different point. But certainly it's a nice ad for some analysts that are doing a lot of regression and modeling. The other thing we added was a binary response for DOE. So for those of you familiar with designed experiments are used to help us really understand a system in terms of what is the effect of the factors. And one of the things the factorial platform and the response service and all the DOE platforms assume is that you have a continuous response. That's great if you do. So there's a lot of times where I'm fitting a model and I'm measuring something like a yield stress or a viscosity or whatever it might be. But there's also times where you're running a DOE and your response is just a yes, no. The person took the offer or they didn't. The part met specification. Well, actually, that's not a good one. The part looks okay or not. In this particular example, we're thinking about soap. When engineers are making the soap, one of the responses will be something that we can measure on a continuous scale. But another thing might be from a marketing side is if the logo's smudged, it's not good. We're not going to be able to sell that at the regular stores. So in that case, I just have a binary response where I'm just measuring, out of a total number I've inspected, how many of those things have an issue. The analysis for that is a binary logistic regression. And we've always had that in Minitab for quite a long time. But the benefit of this addition is that now you can analyze that binary response right in that factorial platform. And what's cool about that is that you don't have to go out to the other platforms. You don't have to know to do that. We'll analyze that data for you right in the DOE platform. Then when you get to things like your graphs that you need, the response optimization to do that join optimization with your categorical and your continuous responses, makes it super easy. We made a lot of enhancements to capability. So capability is probably one of the top tools that we hear from our engineers when they're analyzing data and looking at their process. So a lot of different improvements here. I think the big ones that are important is that global option. The last line, we're adding that global option to display percent instead of parts per million and to display the confidence intervals. So we've had the options under like an option for each platform, but now you've got a global option to do that. Also providing limits. So we've provided limits in terms of one-sided and two-sided limits. And you might think, well, you had that. We had the idea to do lower bound and upper bound, but we modified that to make it even easier because there are times when you're doing an analysis where one of these statistics, you might want the upper bound and another statistic, you might want the lower bound. Either way, we improved on that. So it just makes capability a lot more flexible and gives you really the output that you want in a single shot. We've also added some functionality, mostly for the academic market, but there's certainly applications for commercial as well. The idea of bootstrapping and randomization tests. For those of you who are familiar with our Minitab Express product, which is an academic-only light version of Minitab, we've had these features in there for a while. We added these in Minitab as well, and they're underneath the calc menu. And you'll see that, like I said, very useful when you're teaching students about sampling and distribution, but it's also applicable for some commercial applications where I might want to estimate the distribution of a statistic and some of the assumptions aren't quite met. So if the distribution of a statistic is if we assume that the data has follow an approximate normal distribution and it doesn't, you can always bootstrap and estimate a confidence interval that way. So there's some, like I said, some nice additions for academic, but also some applicability for commercial. So other features and things that we've added. So the simplified access and process improvements. So I'm going to talk about a new menu, how we've cleaned up some of the menus, the way graph editing and brushing works, and some other features pieces as well. So the first is to graph editing and brushing. So with graph editing, said available via that context menu, or of course, you can just always double click on a graph to go into edit mode. Brushing and graph editing is exactly the way it worked before. So with your drop-down list and items and things like that. Brushing we made a little bit more discoverable. So when you go into brush mode, either via from graph editing or directly from that context menu, the idea of set ID variables is something that we've always had in Minitab, but it probably wasn't that discoverable for our users. So we thought we can make this better. So now when you go into brush mode, you automatically get popped up with that side panel, which will show you the different columns that are involved in the graph that you're looking at. And as you brush those rows, it will show you the value. So you can start to look for, a reason for a pattern or an outlier. It's also very easy to add other columns into that view that are in that data set. The other benefit, and you'll see this maybe during the demo, is that when a graph is brushed, the corresponding worksheet comes into focus, and you could see the view of the rows. So you can see it in the data set, but you can also see it here on the right side. So we cleaned up the menus. What we found was that we had a lot of menus in Minitab, and it was starting to get cluttered, and users really didn't find value in the fact that we had more menu items. So the editor, tools, and window menus are now removed. What we did was we took the functionality that was underneath them and rearranged it to make it more discoverable and usable. As an example, the options. So in Minitab 18 and previous, we had the options were underneath the tools options dropdown. In just about any other statistical software, Microsoft or other applications, best practice really is to put preferences or options underneath the file menu. And that's what we did now. So we've really cleaned up a lot of this stuff in terms of, for new users coming into the system, it's more discoverable. For even existing users, they're more likely to look here first before they would have looked under tools to find options. And options, if you're not familiar with those, this is where I can set global options for my analysis. What's nice about that is that like the capability example we were just talking about, if I said as a global option that every time I do capability analysis, I want to display my results as % out of spec instead of parts per million, that will just be saved as part of your profile. And then every time you do, any project in Minitab, you'll generate, the results with those options. And there's a lot of options like changing where you want your file data to open, where you want it to save to, what color you want your graphs. We can certainly show you more details about that. The other things, like I said, related documents, file security, running an exec, all under that file menu. With the new navigator and the interface, we added the view menu. So that view menu, and I'm not sure how many people will use the view menu because I tend to think people will use the buttons on the application, but everybody's different. What that view menu is also the way to access things like the navigator. And this will make more sense when I demo, where you can view your results as data only, your output only, or data and output together. And also, this is where you'll access toolbars and customization, and also zoom, which, again, I think people will mostly use from the interface itself. But we've also improved the way the command line and history gets displayed. So the history window was always something that was under that project manager toolbar. And if you're wondering, as a Release 18 user, the project manager toolbar is gone. We no longer have that project manager toolbar, and it's probably a great thing because it was weird. You had a single click some places, double click other places. You could never remember what was what. Anyway, so we cleaned that up. But one of the things that you accessed via that project manager toolbar was the history window. Now you access that history window from the view menu. So very easy to see that. And the history window, in case you're not familiar with it, it's fine. Minitab is, a code-based language. Any command that you issue to the software, you generate that kind of record in the history window. That's useful for a couple things. One is just to see all the things that you've done or a team member's done in terms of analysis. It's also useful if you're starting to write macros and automate your routine. So you can see, what the code looks like instead of having to type your own code to know this is what you, need to do to generate a certain command. You can actually start creating macros based on analysis that you've already done. It's also useful to see like where files opened from, where they saved to, a lot of convenience. Said most of our casual users probably don't access the history very much, but it's good to know that it's there only because, like I said, if you inherit a project from someone that's maybe on vacation or left the company, you can take a look through their history and get a real good sense of what kind of analyses they've done, even if they've since deleted all their results. The command line also is paired up with this, so I can actually submit code via that command line. So I could either pop existing history code up here and run it command line there, or I can actually copy and paste some code that I've maybe saved that I've used and run that there as well. So we made some performance enhancements, and before I get into a lot of those, just some general housekeeping is the file extension has changed from release 19 going forward. So projects in 19 now have a .mpx extension. So previously they had .mpj, and maybe you never even noticed that. But now we use .mpx. So that file type has changed because of the differences in the interface that we've got. Now you will still be able to open older files, older projects as low as Minitab 16, which I think was released 12, 13 years ago already. Same thing with worksheets. Now instead of MTW are now .mwx. Again, Minitab will be able to open projects and worksheets going as far down as Minitab 16. So some of the performance enhancements. So if you're not familiar, Minitab acquired a company called Salford Systems about 18, maybe 2 years ago. And Salford Systems is a company that does decision trees, data mining, bigger, larger data kind of problems that you can that basically useful tools to analyze larger type data, different types of problems. And part of that idea behind that acquisition was that we realized that customers are having more data coming up from either sensors or just the nature of the data collection, data's coming in faster, and how do you handle those larger amounts of data? Not only for those new tools that we've acquired, but also the tools in Minitab itself. You know, for general linear model regression, there's probably some of you that have analyzed data where Minitab has taken a little longer than you would have expected. We now have a 64-bit version, so Minitab is going to be able to use more of the available memory on a PC. But we've also made significant improvements to a couple different areas. One is linear model performance. So Minitab 19 results come in at least twice as fast, and that's being conservative. Most of them are 5 to 7 times faster, sometimes 10 times faster. Regression, logistic regression, stepwise methods, it's going to run faster for you. Excel files are going to open faster as well, especially Excel files that have datetime formats, which are evidently really hard to open. I didn't know that. So Excel files, larger Excel files are going to open. If you had smaller files of 30 rows, you're probably not going to notice anything. It probably opened pretty fast already. Same thing with graphics. Graphics are rendering much faster. So really a lot of, besides the navigation and the interface improvements, there's a lot of under the covers work to really strengthen Minitab in terms of being able to handle some larger data problems and be able to incorporate some methods down the line that'll really be able to incorporate some of these new methods that we're looking at for Minitab. We also launched Minitab on the Mac. So that's now available. It launched on July 10th. So Minitab V1 on the Mac is available. There's demos online that you could download and certainly take a look at those. We're certainly interested in hearing feedback about that. All right, I'm going to ask another poll question, just last one before we get into the demo. We like just a quick question. Would you like to set up a one-on-one? So if you have some questions about Minitab, you want us to reach out to you, we'll just give a short amount of time for this one. And then what I'm going to do is hand this over to Evan. Actually, no, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a demo of Minitab, then I'll come over and hand this back to Evan. Okay. All right, so now what I'd like to do is do a quick demo of Minitab and show you what some of the stuff looks like. Okay. So what you're looking at is Minitab 19. What you can see, just like we talked about, on the left side is the dedicated navigator. And that navigator, you can easily toggle on or off using that button on the bottom left. So the status bar going across the bottom of the application, this is where we not only have the current data sheet, which is very similar to what we've seen in Minitab 18 and previous, whatever the current data window is always in the bottom left, but also that navigator toggle on and off. So it's very easy to toggle on and off the view of navigation. Across the bottom are my worksheets. So you can see the tab worksheets. Very easy to manage and navigate between those worksheets. Also super easy to add a new worksheet into the system. And like I had talked about, the right mouse click functionality on the worksheet itself will give you things like, adding the description, being able to copy that worksheet, rename the worksheet. That's also where you'll get your worksheet information. That show info will tell you how many rows of data you have, how much missing data you have, things like that. Also, right mouse clicking in the worksheet itself, That'll, of course, give you all that functionality you're used to in terms of your column properties, conditional formatting. It also added the ability to add a cell comment. Had a lot of feedback, over the years about that. Minitab's not a spreadsheet in terms of it's not Excel, but sometimes you want to just put a comment on a cell, and now you can do that. And I just right mouse click to do that. Okay. All right, so when I'm, like I said, looking at these worksheets, right now I'm just looking at the worksheets view. In the bottom right side of the application on the status bar, you'll see this is what I was talking about before with the view menu. So here's the output and data window view. Here's the data only view. So if I just want to look at the data, I can view that middle one that looks like a grid. And this is also where you get zoom. And zoom I can use this way. Also, for those of you with a mouse with a roller ball, you can just control and zoom in and out. You've always been able to do that. And of course, under that view menu, you also have zoom. So it's just like Minitab, there's a lot of different ways to do the same thing. I think it's just really what makes sense for you. So again, so these different windows, like I said, in terms of different worksheets that I can access. If I want to look at that combination of data and my output, I can do that. Let me generate a new piece of output. So here's some measurements. Let me go ahead and generate a graphical summary. So I'm going to look at a graphical summary for the data column. I click on OK. Now, if I put myself into the output only view, you'll see that this is the output pane. And this is what I was talking about before in terms of knowing when the data is current. So here's my summary report for the data. This area right here, the measurements, this is the name of the worksheet that generated these results. So that's the other nice perk of the output pane is you'll always know which data generated that. Again, I can resize, this view. And this is also where that context menu comes in. This is where I can also send to Word or PowerPoint. And like I said, now we can also send to Companion, which is our project execution visibility tool. But also the other functionality that I might need to do, graph editing, stuff like that. If I change one of those data points, real quick, let me change this guy. This is what we talked about before. So you can see for this result, it will tell me that the results don't use the current data, and you have the option of updating these results, which will override these results, or I can create new results, which will just create a copy. Let me go ahead and make a really obnoxious data point to make it really different. Maybe make it even smaller, 17. So I'm going to go ahead and create new results. So I'm going to go into the output only view. So here's the new results that I've just created. So same results, just with this different data set. If I pop my navigator on, you can see that this was the first result that we generated. And here's the second one. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in the split view. So all I'm doing to put it in split view is I'm right mouse clicking on the item that I also want to view, and I'm just choosing open in split view. And notice that now we've got that side-by-side view. So now I can take a look at the new result that I've updated with the new data, and then the results that had the original point. Like I said, and when you're in the split view, I can click and drag to switch the sides. And there really is no limit to the number of splits. So I can, add another item into split view and another item to split view. And again, depending on how good your monitor is, that might be great. It might not be so great, but very easy to do that. What's nice is when you want to get out of split view, there's a couple different ways to do it. One is here under the summary report, I'm just going to click on this little drop down, and I can just say unsplit view, which will take my focus back to that main piece of analysis that I was looking at. So looking at this navigator, right now the navigator I've just left in its kind of default form where it's just the order of things that I've created. But notice this little drop down that we've added next to the navigator. The first thing is that I can group the commands by worksheet. I almost think this should be our default because now as you're generating results from different worksheets, you're going to want to be able to differentiate that very easily. And you can see how easy it is. And this is what I meant by being able to close up the view. So I might have a lot of output, and maybe I don't want to look at the laundry list of all the output for all the different worksheets. But it's really easy to open or close that up. And under that navigator, in addition to the group commands by worksheet, you can see that I can sort by command name, newest to oldest, oldest to newest, however you want to do that. So I can sort within the command sheet sort. Okay. last thing I want to show you is, so we talked about the update for the command. There's also the ability to update results automatically. So maybe I'm doing this analysis and I'm going to have new data coming in. It could be a control chart or something. What I can do is, instead of every time the data changes, and I just hit Control D. So for those of you who are longtime users, all those convenient tips and tricks are still there in terms of Control D brings your current data window up to the front. So here I'm just going to go ahead and change this number back to 53. I might just want to have this data update itself instead of me updating every single time manually having to do that. What I can do is just set this, and this is under the arrow that's underneath the main part of the report. And the reason that is that there are pieces of output. In this case, a graphical summary is just a graph. But if you think about regression analysis, where you have a lot of different tables and graphs, so I have results of my model, my R squared, my p-values. I also have residual plots, maybe mean effects plots. I can click under here. I can say update results automatically. This way, I'm basically just giving you the update to say, hey, every time that data changes, I'm just going to redo the analysis for you automatically. And you will get that notification. So the user, as a user, you'll know that these results are being automatically updated. And again, very easy to shut that off if you don't like it. Okay. All right. As far as some of the new menu items, where they're located, so I mentioned the correlation. Let me go to a data set that makes sense for correlation. Let's do this one. So if I do basic stats, correlation, I'm just going to throw these columns in. They're already there. Options. So you can see we've added some options, the graphs. You're going to have that matrix plot, and you can also decide how you want to display. Let me just click on OK. And focusing on that, you can see that here's the correlation. We get not only the results, we can also get the pairwise Pearson correlation, so more of a longer table. If you had a lot of variables, then maybe you don't want to view it in this with the graphical view. Maybe you just want to see a summary table. You can decide how you want to see that. The other piece I mentioned about graph editing and brushing. So if I click on this graph and choose brush points, notice that when I go into brush mode, I'm popping the graph out. And as I highlight these points, this is what I was talking about with the set ID variables. As I highlight these values, notice a couple of things. One is I'm highlighting them on this graph, but also any other graph where they're relevant. Also, I'm seeing those column names automatically. I don't have to ask for that. And if I need to add another column into that view, I can very easily do that. So I can see those values as I'm choosing around here. Also notice in the bottom left part of the view, if I bring my data set up more, you can see that I said that the worksheet scrolls into view and you can see the values. As I'm scrolling around, it's basically jumping around in that worksheet to show you the different columns that you're highlighting. So you can see all the data in that worksheet besides just what you have in that brush strokes display. Okay. And like I said, the send to, very similar to what you're used to. Send to PowerPoint will send it is exactly as it looks. It's not going to change the view as it goes over. And like I said, send to Companion, which is new in 19, and Companion 5.3, our latest update, will be able to receive that. Let me go back over to presentation. I'm going to turn this over to Evan for a second to talk about Quality Trainer.
Great, thanks, Jen. Yeah, just to talk about Quality Trainer as well, I think it's a really good piece to sort of supplement Minitab, especially for those who aren't familiar with statistical analysis or data, or just statistical analysis concepts in general, as well as how to apply them in Minitab. You'll see Quality Trainer has animated lessons, quizzes, and hands-on exercises. As I said, they'll help you easily learn statistics and facilitate the use of Minitab. With this latest edition, it's in HTML, and also there are options on the back end for getting progress reports on people using this online e-learning solution, and also what courses you might want to assign to them. There's actually a blog at blog.minitab.com that I'm really excited about that kind of talks about how Quality Trainer can be used as well as sort of the concept of blended learning. Now, I'll talk more in a few minutes about our training options and all our other products, but sort of how Quality Trainer can give people a head start for learning statistical analysis even before they go into any training. And really the big thing we're really excited about is it's now in Spanish, Chinese, and Portuguese with an English voiceover. So you'll see where it says the plant manager at the chocolate cookie factory in that screenshot. That will all appear in the native language. You just have to switch the drop down at the bottom right of Quality Trainer, and it'll pop up in that language for your global teams. And Jen, you started to talk about Companion, but I know you got another slide coming up, so I'll let you present that too.
Yeah, thanks, Evan. Yes, so I started talking with Companion. I talked about how Minitab, you can now do a sense of Companion. So Companion, if you're not familiar with it, is our project execution and visibility tool. So basically for executing projects, so a lot of great tools in there, over 100 tools, things like process maps, your brainstorming, fishbone diagrams, Monte Carlo simulation, process optimization. It's a nice tool to kind of keep people organized, working on projects, but also just a nice toolkit in terms of different access of tools that you might need to complement your Minitab analysis. There's also the idea of a dashboard on this, which is basically for companies that are doing big operations excellence, continuous improvement initiatives to really create that visibility in terms of how many different projects are out there, what your savings might be. We can certainly give you more information about that if you're interested. So really at Minitab, like I said, we're really, no matter where you are on your analytics journey, I don't care if you're just at the point where you're making graphs, it's pretty easy to do that within Minitab. I always forget to demonstrate Assistant, and I forgot it again. Let me jump back over real quick. For those of you that are new to Minitab, I just want to show you the Assistant menu. The Assistant menu is right here at the end. And what the Assistant is even things like graphs, it's a place where if you're new to analytics or you're just not sure what tool to use, we actually can help you create those graphs very easily, but even help you choose which graphs make sense. So we'll walk you through, and you can, if you want to start at the top and say, well, I'm not even sure what kind of data I have, we'll walk you through that, and we'll show you what we mean by continuous data or count or summary data. Definitely something, like I said, if you're newer to analytics and you're looking for a tool that's just going to help you pick things and create some really report-ready results that are ready to go, definitely Assistant is for you. So, all right, let me jump back over to presentation. Like I said, it doesn't matter. We have regression methods, logistic regression. Like I said, doesn't matter where you're at. Minitab, we really believe that if you can't easily create your analysis and present those analyses, that slows you down, and that's not good. And like I said, I don't care if you are an analyst that does analysis once a week or a statistician who's analyzing data every day. You need an easy-to-use tool so you can get the important work done and not sit there bogged down and trying to navigate within software. All right, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Evan.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, I think the great thing about these What's New webinars is a lot of you are already familiar with Minitab, but I still want to just take a minute, say a few more things about us. I know only about 10% actually answered on this that they don't use Minitab, but not everybody always knows Minitab statistical software as well as the Companion, Quality Trainer, the other offerings we have in our history. So for nearly 50 years, Minitab has been a leading provider of quality improvement and statistical analysis software. Minitab statistical software has actually been used in implementing countless improvement initiatives around the world, and we help 9 out of the top 10 Fortune 500 companies and over half of the Fortune 500 overall. There we go. And also, to talk more about our products, just to flesh it out a bit more, in addition to Minitab statistical software for data analysis, like you've all seen, Jen mentioned SPM, that's Salford Predictive Modeler, our platform for machine learning and predictive analytics. We also talked a little bit about Companion by Minitab for continuous improvement project management, and Quality Trainer, the e-learning course. In the services area, we offer training year-round, and you can also bring a Minitab trainer to your company to teach your staff. So I'd recommend going to minitab.com/support if you want to learn more about our support and training and statistical consulting options, as well as there's a button right there, talk to Minitab if you're interested, if you have any questions about anything there. And we do like to do a plug for our annual Insights Conference as part of these webinars as well. Especially this year, we'll be excited about showing Minitab 19 there. So, share your knowledge, expand your statistical analysis and quality improvement skills, and network. We'll have the expert advice of Minitab experts in the Minitab lab. For the second year, we're bringing back the user-centered design studio, so you can see future enhancements coming up for Minitab software. And you can ask your questions. We'll have like UX experts who can kind of take your feedback and run from there. We'll get key insights about we'll share insights about how we're developing software, and you can share your insights as well about what can help you work more efficiently with Minitab software. We'll have the second annual golf tournament. And this year, for the first time, if you are coming a day or so early, we have pre-conference workshops for an added fee. So we're really excited to be presenting those. And you can check out info.minitab.com/insights to get more information on all of that. Also, if you register by the end of the month, July 31st, you can save $100 off the full conference rate with our early bird rate. And yeah, so we have a good about 7 or so minutes left here. So I did want to again mention this is being recorded. We'll send you the presentation and the recording by email just in case you need to drop off and you want to make sure you hear all the questions that Jenn is going to answer in a moment. Also, when we do drop off, please remember to answer those survey questions. We appreciate it if you could take some time to answer those. So yeah, Jenn, if you want to take a look at some of the questions we have in here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. Yeah, a lot of great questions, and my thanks to Marilyn, who's been answering questions for everyone during the session. One of the questions that I saw was, is it possible to have two versions of Minitab at the same time? Yes, I actually have Minitab 18, 17, and 19 on my computer. So if you have Minitab 18 and you want to try the 19 demo, you can easily download that, and you won't have any problems for that. Another good question was, will the Quality Trainer be updated for version 19? And that answer is yes. We've updated Quality Trainer for version 19, so you have some updates there. And like Evan had mentioned, the HTML and really a lot of the administration type things. So if you're at an organization where it's important to track, people going through certain lessons or, quizzes and things like that, it's very easy to manage that stuff.
Yeah, Jenn, I might really quick cut in. I forgot to mention earlier, there's a video tour of Quality Trainer at minitab.com/qualitytrainer. So if you are interested in seeing the updates to the visuals of it, you can just click watch video tour when you're there.
Yeah. So there was also a question about, do we have an online training for macros? There are some resources online. Evan, what just reminded me is Evan just mentioned the Insights Conference. Actually, 2 of the workshops at the Insights Conference this year are early, beginners macros session in the morning, and then an advanced macros session in the afternoon. So if you want to spend a day learning macros at Minitab for about $300, that would be a good way. And I think you have to be a member of the conference as well. But like I said, it's a good conference in terms of a lot of just Minitab, obviously, besides us sharing information, but a lot of users sharing some really cool applications of how they're using Minitab. There's a question about how to calculate, it was figuring out the action limits for reaching a certain capability. metric and setting those specification limits. For those kind of things, I would recommend that you think about something like tolerance intervals, which Minitab 19 or actually 18 has had tolerance intervals for both normal and non-normal data. It's a tool that's similar to capability, but it's really good to estimate things in terms of when you're setting specifications. That would be something that you might look at to do that. Question about, has Minitab, have we done any changes to Monte Carlo simulation? You can do Monte Carlo simulation in Minitab. What you can't do is the kind of stuff that we can do within the companion products. So companion, you can do Monte Carlo simulation. And one of the nice additions to actually companion 5.3 is that we've added the ability to be able to import directly Minitab models into companion. So if I've fit a model to, let's say, my DOE in Minitab, in companion, I can just open that model and it will populate my Monte Carlo simulation. Again, I can do Monte Carlo in Minitab. The thing I can't do is the parameter optimization, that genetic algorithm, and the sensitivity analysis, which is really the, I think, important parts. If you're just looking to estimate and understand the variability, that's fine. But if you really want to look to improve and change the settings for those X's or those factors, you probably want to take a look at companion. Question about doing some different types of analyses with parametric, linear regression, and more. From Minitab 17 forward, we've had a lot of tools that really should suffice for those kind of things. Some of the new improvements in 19 in terms of with the correlation and looking at those, probably going to be more convenient. Some of the modeling as well, and actually the linear regression for the modeling itself. So number one, besides it being faster, the model selection, that Kai-Key's criteria, it tends to be a better way to pick those models, especially when you have a lot of X's. One of the questions, one of the questions about changes to MSA, not really a lot of changes into measurement systems analysis for this release. In release 18, we had updated following those AIAG guidelines. So there were some changes there in terms of how we use historical standard deviation and stuff. So those are there. Questions were, will some of the capabilities of SPM be included in 19? Yes, we're working on incorporating some of those nice improvements into Minitab. I don't want to give too much detail now, but suffice it to say that, yes, we purchase these algorithms. We believe that they have a lot of value for not only data scientists, but also engineers who have a lot of problems that these algorithms can help you solve your problems pretty nicely. So yeah, moving forward, we see that as a combination. Let's see. There's a question about matrices, matrix algebra. That's still in, or to handle the matrices, that's still in Minitab. You can still do that. Let me just pop over into Minitab and look. It's under the calc menu. Yes, under the calc menu, at the very bottom, you'll see matrices, and that's where you can see just functionality with matrices. Also, the calc menu, remember I mentioned the resampling tools that we've added in there. So that's where you can access the bootstrapping and randomization tests. Okay. The question of how many variables can Minitab handle for Minitab's correlation matrix? I don't know if there's a limit. I think that this graph will be ridiculous with the graphs, but in that case, I would think that you wouldn't want to look at the graph. One of the options under correlation would be, actually not there, under the graph. I probably wouldn't want to even view the graph and shut that off. And then what I want to do is under the results, just look at the pairwise correlation table and not look at the matrix. In that case, what I would do is just be looking at this. So if I had a lot of variables to calculate this for, I probably just want to see that table. And again, just like everything in Minitab, I can send these results straight over into the PowerPoint, Word, or Companion. Or I can always copy and paste into another, depending on where I'm presenting my results. One of the questions in split view is a way to make sure the axes have the same scale. We don't have a way to set that, only because I can split view anything. But that's good feedback. So if, the feedback would be if I was viewing something where I wanted them to be, if they're graphs, to be on the same scale. But right now, the split view is really just splitting up the output pane so you can see the different views. And like I said, with that, there's no limit to the splits. I just think it's more of a limit on how good your computer, how big your monitor is. The other thing I should mention is sometimes we've gotten that question is, did we remove the layout tool? And no, we did not. So if I take a look at any kind of graphs or any kind of analysis, we still have the ability to do a layout tool and split this view. So I can still put graphs in a layout that I might want to take a look at, either effects Pareto, a main effect plot for something, whatever it might be, tolerance intervals. I can still create the layout, which is a little different than the split view. The split view is really more of a taking a look at results together. The layout tool is really laying out, multiple graphs into a layout that maybe I want to put into another report. Okay. Question, Minitab is working on a Mac. Yes, we do have a Mac version that was released July 10th. So definitely you can go online and download a demo of that Mac version. We'd love to hear your feedback. That's, first time Minitab has been on a Mac in about 15, 20 years. So, let's see. Lots of good questions. Okay.
Yeah, it looks like we're about at time.
Okay.
Sorry, but we can go ahead
sorry,
and take I think maybe one more question.
Yeah, no, it was a question was, can you remove the upper and lower control chart on an eye chart? I would say then just do a time series chart, because if the question was, can I take out the upper and lower control limits? That's kind of the purpose of the eye chart, but you can certainly create a chart where you just, an eye chart's always going to have the limits on it. You could delete them after you make the graph, or I think an easier thing would just be to make a time series plot, and you could plot that over time. There's also things like a run chart under the quality tools menu. The run chart is a lighter version of a control chart, which just is testing for different, mixing and non-randomness of data. Anyway, I do realize we're almost over time. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, and thanks, Jen, for presenting today. I did want to mention, finally, you might have seen it pop up on our thank you screen. We do always have that 30-day free trial. So whether you're using an older version of Minitab statistical software or if you're not using it at all, go ahead to minitab.com. There's a really prominent button right there, so you can download it and try it out, and let us know if you're interested or have any questions about it. But yeah, again, on behalf of all of us at Minitab, I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. We appreciate you guys taking the time to join us today. And if you have another couple minutes, you'll see that survey pop up. So if you could answer some questions there, just so we can tailor future content for you and know sort of what your interests are, we really appreciate it. So yeah, thanks again, everybody, for joining What's New with Minitab 19. And have a good one.